Welcome to the final video from Westeros.org for Season 4 of Game of Thrones. This is going to be our season overview where we discuss our thoughts on the season as a whole, as well as go through each point of view. We're going to do basically by book point of view and by region. So, and also obviously discussing all other important characters in a region. And then finishing off, I guess, with some final thoughts and giving some overall highs and lows, perhaps, and a few things like that.
Yeah. So, our initial impressions for season 4.
Yeah.
Let's the easy one. How does it compare to previous seasons in your view?
It's like season 3. I feel that it is better than the second season, which is so far the low point. It's hard to say. It definitely doesn't get up to the level of the first season either. I don't think the show ever will again. It was much more faithful then. It's kind of weird. I looked back a little recently just in the things that we reacted to as being deviations then. Probably you wouldn't bat an eyelash at these days, really.
An example?
Well, obviously the big one, I mean, and then sort of set the tone for what was going to come later in terms of character deviations. Like, I hated that Cersei and Robert scene in the first season. And, well, by now, Cersei is such a changed character, and every scene is like, oh, this really isn't the same character. But, you know, for the most part, I'm quite jaded about it.
Yeah.
It's difficult to muster the anger.
No, it's absolutely true that they have changed a lot of the characters along the way, and sort of it became more and more. So certain characters are really no longer remotely like the characters that George wrote. Cersei, I mean, the way they finish her up this season is such a radical 180. Like, there's no way you can logically have George's character reach that same point. So they've completely re-envisioned the character, and we always felt that they sort of toned things down, they tweaked it a bit.
And it just kept going in that direction, and
so it's become something very different, and so it's so strange to know that they're gonna still try and hit similar plot points going forward. I mean, that's quite clear, I think.
And that's the problem, because often you have to shove the characters towards them as a part of having a natural progression. I think we are feeling this already with season 4, that they are putting characters into positions that they draw from the novels, but it's not the same characters, so they wouldn't be in those positions, they wouldn't do those things.
No, it's absolutely true, and I think...
So where would you put it in terms of 3 and 4? I find it difficult.
I think...
It felt uneven to me.
Well, let's talk about Westeros.org, the forum. The forum has a poll which has hundreds of people voting on each episode, and now the vote can be quite polarized. There are people who will vote 1. If they didn't like it, it's a 1. If they loved it, it's a 10. And there's other people who do more nuance. And the thing is 1 to 10 is subjective. What 1 is and what 10 is and what 5 is. Some people treat 5.
We've clearly established that our scale is nothing like it. I mean, your 7 is nothing like my 7.
Exactly. And that's globally, everyone has their own take. However, I think that the averages we get, because we have so many people voting, give a sense of the overall sort of average forum show watcher feeling. Now, in fact, this season ended up being, I think, just slightly ahead of the second season, which is on the forum considered the worst season and was very uneven. And it's actually considered worse than 3. Now, I think that's unfair. I think, and we'll discuss it a bit, but the third episode and the steps scene had an enormous negative reaction on our forum.
For all the wrong reasons, really.
For all the wrong reasons. We thought it was actually a pretty good episode ourselves. Well, but we read it. We read that scene in the way that they intended.
There were mistakes made in how they framed the scene, but not to the level that people have been negative about it.
Yeah, so because of that, they gave that episode particularly a very low rating. And if that hadn't happened, if they had done that one properly, I think it's quite clear that the 4th season would have been held by the forum to be the second best season after the first episode. But there's quite a margin between the first season and the 4th season. You know, when we say the first season is best, I think we look purely in terms of the story, the narrative. The production values have obviously gotten bigger and better. They know how to spend.
There's no question about that. I mean, the show is looking more epic.
Yeah, they have certainly gotten a better sense of how to spend the money. They have gotten a better sense of how to get the most out of their locations. So it looks bigger. It looks grander. And
I don't think, for example, if the first season was being done now, as in if they had the same resources and same experience, that Robert would go out hunting on foot.
No, they probably would have done something.
Which was one of the things that, oh my God, this feels so small. That was probably our big tonal problem with season 1. Everything felt kind of small compared to the novels. You know, the tourney of the hand didn't look anything as grand as it should have.
I'm not sure they would ever be able to manage that anyways. But that said, I mean, the location, look at Bravos, look at Marine, they're able to throw out these huge CGI, digital matte vistas.
Obviously it wouldn't be a movie level anyway, but it would
have been bigger.
It would have been bigger.
If they had had the same resources and the same knowledge. But there were a lot of mistakes in the production, learning curve stuff. But story-wise, and it's not just because, like, it is because it's incredibly faithful, right? Yeah. And it is because Game of Thrones, the novel, is a very strong book, and they knew it, and they saw it, and it was also a very adaptable book because the narrative is
more centralized.
More centralized. Everyone's more or less in just a couple of locations. It doesn't get so spread out. They come to the challenge as the seasons progress of more and more characters spread out. It's the same thing with the Peter Jackson's films, with the Lord of the Rings films. So they had the same issue. When you start spreading things out, you suddenly have to cut the story, and it starts becoming difficult.
I think it was also easier to have the story pinned on a character like Ned.
Yeah.
Who they didn't really change that much, other than, you know, again, one of the tiny little deviations in the first season. It turns out Ned's a great fighter.
Oh, yeah.
And that little pissing contest with Jamie, and like, which caused a huge uproar then. And again, people
now
wouldn't,
it's like,
whatever, because everything's changed so much. But I think that for me, it's much more problematic to have characters like Tyrion and Cersei take center stage when they've done so much to change them. That just changes the tone more, whereas Ned stayed quite true to Ned Stark of the books on the whole.
It's true.
So tonally, it felt much more like.
It's so true that, I mean, I think people are looking, someone has done a count of screen time for characters across all the seasons. And Tyrion, of course, is number 1 by a country mile. I think he has almost twice as much time as his second most featured character. And I think Cersei is like the number 3 character.
Something like that,
So she has become, very early on, quite a significant character compared to where she's not a point of view character, where she's an antagonist who's seen through others' eyes all through the first 3 books. And
she's nothing like Cersei of the books, which changes so much.
Yes, it changes a lot, and it makes it... And every time, almost, I mean, just the butterfly effect. George has talked about it, and he's brought it up again and again, and he's mentioning it more and more, because everyone's like, what about this scene in the Sept? And, well, the butterfly effect there, it's not what I intended, it's not what I wrote, the situation is completely different, and you have to accept it.
The characters are different, they're in a different situation and everything,
So for me, the first season was the one that, because it was a great story being adapted faithfully, pretty faithfully, like 90% faithfully, it was really strong. The production values were a bit down. But as they got better at the production value, they got a more complex narrative. And then I think the sophomore season had some real problems. The second season had real issues with pacing and how to kind of get the flow of a story. I think for the most part, by this season, the third as well, and the fourth season, they started really getting a grip on how to structure the narrative. Like, you'll have episodes where characters are gone for 2 or even 3 episodes, and then they come back.
I'm not so concerned about that. This is true.
Although there is, we'll discuss later, a weird place where Vish crops up and it feels a little odd.
Yeah.
They've gotten better at that, but at the same time, they're creating, the changes they've done have led to some fairly poor moments. Some adaptation choices they've made have robbed the power of some really significant scenes. And some of the inventions they do are things that you kind of realize you know, that's 10 minutes we wasted on this, and nothing. The status quo is preserved.
Yeah.
The story hasn't changed. The characters haven't changed. It was a little loop in time. Just
that one, yes.
yeah. So that's gonna be another one we'll discuss. So.
See, here's the power of my mind to suppress things. I just realized one thing that does probably make season 4 better than season 3 for me.
Oh.
No goddamned Talisa. I had kind of forgotten all about her, and then realized there was something about season 3 that really annoyed me. Yeah, inventions. Thank God she's dead and buried.
Yeah, that was not a shining moment, I think. And I will say in general...
Stupid decision of having Rob on stage with his little love story.
I could have even seen it's Talisa specifically.
And how they
characterize it and how they characterize the relationship. I wouldn't have a... I think it was brilliant of Mark George to have Rob off camera.
Yeah.
He has later said, like, well, I kind of pondered maybe I should have had him as a character. But I think there's a lot more power to the idea of there's this young hero doing heroic stuff and you just hear about it. And then when things are looking kind of dark and messed up, he shows up at the beginning of the next book. You know, he's here. Everything's gonna be fine. You know, there's a power to that kind of deliberate hiding and showing, hiding and showing.
And then it screws things up.
And things go to hell in a handbasket.
Yeah.
7 hells in a handbasket.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Talisa was not...
Obviously, I guess it's an improvement for you as well, season 4, because you don't have to see them screw up Catelyn.
The power of my mind.
You've
yes.
forgotten about that.
Catelyn. Yeah. Let's not dwell on the past. Let's go forward.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay, find season 4 marginally before season 3, because of...
Well, I mean, I think there's just one. I mean, okay, the first season for us was like the only season for the forum, but didn't have any episode rated lower than like a 7. Every other season had an episode rated 6. Now, of course, I think it's a little unfair again on this season because it's episode 3 that got nailed by people. That said, that's how the forum feels. Yeah, I think it's better. I think it's better in some ways, and I think partly, it's the deviations. There's some big deviations for certain characters. We'll discuss Brienne, for example. Her story is quite different, and to the point where it feels like, well, they haven't really. They finished her Storm of Swords story, and they've done a little loop for her. But a consequential one. It has consequences. It's not like what they've done is they've created a new storyline, and then they could slot her right back into a Feast for Crows storyline without a problem. I don't know if that's what they're doing. I just realized, like, at the end point of this, I could see them going and basically finishing her Feast for Crows story.
I doubt it, though. But...
Oh, I have a feeling. We'll discuss that when we get there.
All right.
So yeah, it's not the best season. It's production value wise, it's the best season. I think there's no question.
The dragons are fabulous. The CGI for the various locations has been utterly fabulous, and it's really looking epic now.
Yeah, and they did have some real interesting structural challenges. And particularly Tyrion he spends 60% of his time, 70% of his time as a prisoner.
Yeah. Well, it's only a structural challenge if you're hung up on Tyrion as the main character.
Well, it's a structural challenge. You still have to, like, you can't hide him away.
No.
He still does stuff. Stuff still happens to him. But it was interesting to see how they got around it. In part with the obvious, well, Jaime's here, why isn't he talking to Tyrion? So it's a big change.
Yeah.
But it's one that allows access to Tyrion. So I think it's there's a lot that's solid and a lot that's not so solid. But let's see. Let's just get out of the way. What is the biggest high? What is your absolute favorite episode or favorite moment or in the whole season?
Easy one. Episode 7. Oberyn and Tyrion's talking themselves.
That's a fantastic scene. Pedro Pascal, really, I mean, talk about inauspicious beginnings. I mean, the first episode, it worked, the brothel thing, fine, it's quick and so on.
But they were overselling in episode 1, 2, and 3. They were... Yeah. 1 and 2 mostly.
3 as well, yes. The brothel, we were concerned about, like, every episode they were in the brothel.
Yeah.
And then he actually lives in a brothel, and it's like it's a little it's
we joked
overdone.
about it, and then turned out that they did move in there. But I mean, this was actually his first scene, I believe.
The very first scene he filmed, I believe, was
the one with Tyrion, and it is
yes,
without a doubt his best scene.
Sorry, yeah.
And I mean, that really turned me around on. I had been kind of, oh God, they're just not doing the character justice and which colored my perception of how he was acting the character. And then once we got to that scene, like, yeah, absolutely love the performance here.
Yeah,
it was.
No, it was fantastic. Pascal really knocked it out of the park. Dinklage knocked it out of the park.
Yeah.
It was, I think, it's definitely a high. If I would give an episode a high, I think episode 9 worked really well.
Yeah.
I think it's, with Blackwater, it doesn't have the emotional core that I think Blackwater had, by having scenes that were quiet, non-fighting scenes of people whose fates were in the hands of other people, with Sansa and Cersei and so on. But as a piece of bravura, action, adventure, direction, and sort of narrative creation, I thought that it was very, very well done. And credit to them and to Neil Marshall for really being able to sell it. I think Kit Harington again had some really nice beats here. The Samuel Gilly stuff, I felt maybe not the best in the world, but I think
I don't know that their story is. I mean, I like John Bradley as Samuel, but I don't know that his story with Gilly is particularly compelling.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where they go from next season, actually. But yeah, and then if we're going to go from high, we have to go to like, what's the biggest low? What's the thing that most?
Well, this is a difficult one. And do you go with something that really disappoints you because it should have been a lot better, or just some big fuck up? I mean,
you say, and I'll pick one of the others.
Okay. Well, I really wanted Oberyn and Gregor's duel to be something completely different. That is my biggest disappointment of the season, without a doubt.
Yeah,
the fact that they just couldn't get the mood, the choreography, the general feel of it was just all wrong. They just went for, oh, well, we've got a spectacular, gruesome death, and that's all we need, and then we can throw in some fancy moves along the way, and no.
No, I totally agree in terms of that as being a real problem, and I've spoken our piece about it, and I mean, I
just looked forward to it so much.
Yeah, I went full on cinema geek level and was going through videos and films and counting, how many shots you had and in these scenes to try and get a sense of why I was so dissatisfied with this one. What I could find is that this one is extraordinarily quickly cut for the kind of fight scene that it is. I couldn't find anything else that matched it. I will hold still that when you have a guy using a spear and another guy using a longsword one-handed, there's a lot of space that has to be covered between the two as their weapons fight. And if there's more space, you have to give it more time so you can actually see what's going on. And their choices to go with the wushu, which led to the necessity of a stunt double doing, a lot of that scene.
There should have been more acting in that scene.
Yeah. To the point where there are bits of a stunt double in there where there's no stunt going on. It's literally like, for whatever reason, they decided, well, no one's going to be able to tell except those geeks who decide to kind of say something looks wrong here, and they go frame by frame and they're like, oh, look, why are we using a stunt double here? They kind of, just for convenience sake, say, well, let's have a stunt double here.
Rather than having a cutback and
having some acting moment. So it was a huge mistake on a directorial and choreography and editing level. I think it was a huge mistake on the production level by going with the wushu.
Yeah.
And because that then necessitated a stunt double who was doing a lot of the stunts, which then necessitated lots of either like distancing long shots that were there just to obscure primarily, or super rapid editing And so you would have, you even see in the videos, I mean, you'll see Pedro Pascal he'll do the start or the end of a movement, and all the in-between stuff is a stunt double. Yeah. That was, I think, for the fight, okay, for the fight that is, I think, one of the 2 or 3 most memorable in the whole series to date. It deserved better.
Yeah.
And
it deserved something that fit what George describes in terms of tactics.
I mean,
it's such a big point made out of the fact that he's gonna be tiring out Gregor, not tiring out himself. I mean, it made no sense.
Yeah, and then yes, I mean, I know, like they have the thing where Gregor's using the sword one-handed, but like there's no reason for him to do so because he doesn't have a shield, and there's like logical stuff that he didn't even think about. I don't know why. I don't know where that came from. And then we're in this perspective of just the hype machine, and I think someone very Stefan Sauce of Nerdstream and the Boyle Lover Audio Hour and Tower of a Hand wrote a review, and he kind of complained of my citing the fact that they hyped this so much. There was a two-week period where there was a hiatus, and there was a huge amount of advertising about this episode. I mean, HBO was really
this is the first time they had like a really big event that everyone knew was going to go down. So it was very different because, I mean, you didn't know in advance that the Red Wedding was going to happen. It was like, yeah, attend the wedding of the year next week. They didn't do that. Yeah,
so they knew what was going to, so, and they really pushed it. I mean, you have to live under a rock not to see all the ads. I mean, if you were looking at YouTube videos, chances are very good that you'd get a 30-second, episode 8 hype video from HBO. You'd see ads. You would see articles. EW had tons of them, including David and Dan calling it, the finest and fight scene they'd ever done. And so you want to trust them. You wanted to believe that when they say that this is really fantastic, that it's going to be really fantastic. And then when you see that it's not, you have to hold it against them. I don't see. You can say, oh, hype, you can ignore it. I mean, funny thing is, Stefan did a review of episode 10 for Tower of Hand. I will hold you to this. Stefan, you opened that review commenting about the hype for the episode, and did it live up to it? And I don't really know. I don't. And I get a distinct sense that you too have admitted that the way they promote something will have an impact on how you view it, because if they feel it's fantastic and you don't see how it is, there is a disconnect between you and the people who have made the show, and you have to, like, what is it that they thought they were doing that I'm not seeing? And that's actually a worthwhile thing to discuss and view. So that I had a little beef there. I thought it was a little odd. And in any case, the main point was editing was a real issue. The choices they made were real issues that all contributed to the sense that this isn't, the bill of goods wasn't, there. I'll pick one of the other things. Obviously, we dwelled on this so long, but episode 10 had bits that were great, and it had bits that were pretty good, that shouldn't have been pretty good, that should have been flat out amazing. And obviously, the best example is Tyrion and what happens. And I think we'll discuss more there in his section when we discuss him. But the final moments for him were underwhelming, robbed of so much. And I think it's deliberate mistakes they made, not deliberate, mistakes they made early on that led them to be unable to sell this moment in a way that makes it so powerful. And a lot of it has to do with characterization of Tyrion. The fans will say the whitewashing of Tyrion, in the sense that he is a much nicer guy than George's character. Tyrion of the novels is at this point a murderer. But I mean, before even Shay, I mean, he has murdered a person. He has ordered a person murdered because he didn't want trouble for himself.
2 people, right?
2 people?
Didn't he ask?
Well, he has he does suggest Alardine be
fall off the ship.
But that's a horrible person who killed a baby, and you think, okay, but he murdered someone who's tried to blackmail him.
Yeah.
And that's, and he's blackmailing him because the guy knows, well, you've defied your father with Shay, and I might tell that story. And Tyrion says, well, murder. And that's like, it's a dark deed. And also he's someone who has smacked Shay around when she annoyed him.
I don't exactly see that.
And they've taken all that out, and then they've taken back even a deeper history.
Yeah.
And that was a real thing, but we'll discuss it more then. I have here, and I don't know, maybe we should save this for final thoughts. What do you think about discussing how much have they covered of the novels? I think we can discuss it here.
Yeah, we can do that right away.
They have finished the Storm of Swords for almost everybody. Jon Snow is, and I think maybe
significant material.
And I think maybe a surprise for some people, but it didn't go that far. But I actually think I predicted that they might not have gone that far. So I'm yay for me. Yeah. I don't know how much you're going to make of it. I don't know if it's going to be the first episode will resolve it, or the first 3 episodes will resolve it. We don't really know how long they're going to... it would be odd for the first episode to resolve, but the second episode could sort of, and then push it onto the Dance of Dragons story. Well, a Dance of Dragons storyline.
Because obviously, if you're not familiar with the books, Jon is one of the characters who's not in A Feast for Crows. He's only in A Dance with Dragons. So he's only got...
Well, he does appear in A Feast for Crows. Remember that? The first Samuel chapter.
Oh, that's true. But not as an own point of view. But yes,
so that's the main one, but everyone else has pretty much gotten there. Now, for Feast for Crows, you have some interesting stuff. You have characters that aren't there at all. They haven't done anything. Samwell, again. Sam's story is not at all really...
on the same track.
I don't think they're going to put him on the same track. I think, and maybe for the final thoughts, we'll discuss more. I think I can see sort of how they'll use some of it, but I don't think, one of the predictions I made for IO9 when Charlie Jane Andrews contacted me and asked, for me to again provide some predictions. I don't know if I want to spoil. Let's just say I predicted that I don't think Samuel's going to be going on the same journey that he is. We're not going to the same destination as he is in this season. I could be wrong. I don't have any inside knowledge. It just seems right to me based on the general flow of the production and its needs and so on. Other characters like Brienne sort of kind of loosely touches like the opening of her Feast for Crows. She's hunting Sansa. We got that. But what happens after that start is completely different.
Yeah.
But in a way that I think will allow it to loop back and resume that if they wanted. I can see...
If they want her wandering around more.
Well, the one thing... a couple of thoughts come there. One, the Brotherhood of Banners and Hot Pie. The encounter of them make me think that they don't want you to forget about them.
True.
2, I could see them starting her by finally getting to the Vale and the Eyrie in a little close encounter where Littlefinger has to hide Sansa from Podrick, and maybe Sansa ends up running into Brienne, who doesn't recognize her at all, and a little byplay.
But
and
she should. Again, she saw her, as we established.
She did. You're absolutely right. She did see her. So that, no, it doesn't work at all.
As we established when we discussed it the other day.
Yes.
But yes, she did see her. You had her and Brienne and Jaime stalking Sansa in King's Landing.
That's fair enough.
Weird little scene with them.
No, you're absolutely right, and therefore, it doesn't make sense at all.
No.
So, no, I don't know. Maybe still getting to Eyrie and Littlefinger interacts with them or something. So that could eat up an episode or 2 before.
Yeah, because where they would head now, I mean...
They've lost, they fought, they said the Vale, so...
Yeah, they're still in the Vale. They lost Arya at the moment, but...
They're still hunting Sansa.
The idea they would just turn around would not make sense either.
I'd like to... they could go to the Vale. They could go to meet Littlefinger, and he leads them to... But he's been trying to help find, and he's Lord of Harrenhal now. I believe they set that up on the show. I believe so.
I think so.
And have him say, well, I've had reports that I've been trying to find her as well for, and maybe even persuade them, he's doing it for Cat, not for the Lannisters. And, that I had reports of in the Riverlands of this girl and something, and they go there. I don't know. It's just... other characters, Reek, Theon, has gone into A Dance of Dragons. A fair way, but he has quite a few chapters left.
As we expected, we rewatched our commentary for the overview for Season 3, and obviously we had expected that, given that they kept him on stage and showed that all of the torture had happened, they pretty much had to move into the Dance with Dragons material because he's not in A Feast for Crows, so they had to go straight onto a Dance with Dragons.
And I figured up to Moat Cailin basically, and that. So that's just his second chapter in A Dance with Dragons.
Yeah. And he has quite a few.
He has quite a few more than that. So they definitely have a lot of room. It depends on what they do with the North and the conflict there. That's a real question as well. But you know, there's a lot of A Feast for Crows and Dance with Dragons material left for a number of characters. Cersei, there's another character, hasn't touched her Feast for Crows material at all. Jaime hasn't touched his Feast for Crows. Everyone in King's Landing, no one has done their Feast for Crows. On the other hand,
his Feast for Crows material is probably not. I don't know what they're doing with it, given that they're underplaying Riverrun completely.
Well, as I said, they may be sorry to bring it back in, but it could be something that they may play more for a 6th season.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Certainly, what we are seeing is that they are
shoving
things around quite a bit. They are delaying things, and in a sense, it's good that they don't cut things all together. On the other hand, when they do these, it doesn't always line up very logically.
No, the time. I mean, they even joke about it, but Jaime, for the next season, Jaime's finishing up his jetpack. So expect Jaime Lannister to be doing a fair amount of traveling, and within a couple of episodes showing up in different locations. So
I see.
Oh, you missed that one.
I missed that one. Yeah. I try not to pay attention to what David and Dan says any longer. It just gives me things I'm curious about.
Yeah. We'll pick up the discussion of where we are, because I think at the end we'll discuss a little bit of where we think they're going.
Dany, we should probably touch on her in terms of where she is in book.
Dany's an interesting one. I don't think she went as far as some people expected.
No.
I think she basically, this final episode basically touches on material from her first chapter.
Yeah.
And in between her first and second chapters. And she has a lot of chapters. So there's plenty of material for a Dany storyline in the 5th season, drawn entirely from Dance with Dragons. I think one of the big concerns for fans was that the Winds of Winter was going to suddenly crop up in this 5th season. And I think,
Bran.
Other than Bran, I don't think we're going to get much, if anything, from...
Because apart from one chapter, Bran is finished with the Dance with Dragons.
Yeah, but other than that, I don't think they're going to have anything that goes really beyond the 5th book and into new storylines that have not yet been published. I think.
Little spoilers. We had already some potential little spoilers and sneak peeks of with the others and with Melisandre.
Little things like that.
Little things like that could definitely start cropping up more and more.
Yeah.
But actual storylines, it's mainly just Bran, I think, that is a concern.
Yeah.
What on earth they're doing with him.
So, but let's now move. What we're going to do is we're going to discuss things. We're going to kind of, last time we seemed to kind of jump around the point of views kind of randomly.
I think we tried to order them by which ones we liked best, but
maybe
that's perhaps a little more difficult this year.
Yeah. So let's, what we'll do is go region, and we'll try to sort, and then we'll look at the point of views within those regions. And we're going to be using, by point of view, I am literally talking about the point of views in the book. So we're going to use that as our primary sort of focal point, like how did they adapt, or what have they done with that. At the same time, what we'll do is each region has some significant individuals who are never point of views or whatever, and we'll discuss them separately at the end of those, and then we'll go on to a new region. So hopefully it'll make sense and cohere. It seemed easiest to go with the most disconnected region.
Yeah, so we're starting in Essos.
And obviously the point of view there is Dany. She is the only point of view in the novels for that region for a good part of the series, and certainly through Stone Swords.
Dance with Dragons.
Yeah. How did we feel about her story? I thought my issue, and this is the first season I think I really started to have this issue, was Emilia Clarke's performance. And I love her. I mean, I've met her.
Yeah, she's really enthusiastic about the work. She's
read everything
about the books. It just seems like unfortunately she doesn't quite have the range.
It feels a lot of sometimes feels very theatrical. She and she did a turn on Broadway, or on last year, I think. So reviews on it, but I don't know. She plays things really big.
I think the Danny that they cast her to play as in the young, uncertain Danny, and when she is uncertain, when she is sad or upset or low key, I think she still does it very well. The scenes with when she's locking up the dragons, for example, that's a lovely scene. The way
Yeah.
she's interacting with them, and I don't have a problem with her there. But whenever she's trying to play stern or imperious or temperamental, there's some dissonance.
It works when she's speaking Valyrian at the same time, but then that's more of that is just the novelty of the Valyrian, I think.
Yeah.
But like last
Well,
year,
I think what it actually does is that she has to concentrate on the lines more and maybe act a bit less.
that could be it.
I mean, that's just speculation on my part, but
That's an interesting thought. So I think this season was the one where we were starting to feel like she needs some help from the directors and so on to kind of hone her performance a bit better.
yeah.
The actual story content is, I think, okay. Some of it's pretty good. I mean, like for example, some people were upset at how quickly the marine business was resolved, and to me, I mean, here's production.
Yeah.
They all the stuff they're doing. I mean, look how short episodes were on average this season. That is almost certainly in large part due to the fact that budget was being shoved and filming time was being shoved elsewhere.
AKA episode 9.
Episode 9 and episode 10.
Yeah.
So basically, they sort of shortchanged us through the first 8 episodes and then laid it all out. I mean, even episode 9 is kind of short; it's like 50 minutes, but it's a massive spectacle. And episode 10 it has like 10 extra minutes, which basically, if you look at all your previous episodes, they almost gain like a minute and a half if you were to spread it out. I don't know. So Marine, I had no problem with the resolution of infiltration and from the inside, and it's doing real quickly. I mean, there's a siege, there's this huge sprawling camp of freedmen, and then there's an attack on Danny, and all these things. I don't have a problem with that because I can fully understand that there's things they cannot afford, and when they can't afford something, I can okay, fine. They came up with a good solution. The Marine after that, after she has it, I mean, they're playing with her struggle between sort of to force people to do what she wants, and the violent tendencies come out where she thinks of very violent solutions. The best example of this, of course, after Dario comes to her and asks her, send me to fight your enemies, and next day we have her telling Jorah, I'm sending Dario and his second sons to Yunkai to kill all the masters.
Yeah.
And I asked, I did an interview with Mikhail Huisman, which I will eventually figure out how to get out, because unfortunately the recordings I had running, none of them worked, and so all I had were a few notes, and
your memory.
And my memory being what it is, I don't quite know how to salvage that in a good way, because I don't want to put things in quotes, but I can't absolutely vouch for direct statements. But I mean, I have the general gist of everything. And what he said is, I asked him, do you think that particular part of it, was it his idea? Does he tell her, just send me to kill everyone? Or was that Danny's sort of, yeah, okay, I'll let you fight, and by the way, you go and kill all the people. And he thought, his view was that wasn't Dario, that was actually Danny who came up with this extreme solution. For all the good that killing all the masters had done in Astapor, when King Cleon the Butcher takes over and starts it all over again. So
obviously, I guess the guy isn't called, I guess we should know, the Butcher, because he's going around killing people.
Well, he was a butcher.
Because he was an actual butcher.
But he also does kill people.
Yes, but you made it sounding like that, like, oh my god, they got this horrible person.
Well, he is a horrible person because he was a butcher who somehow was able to unseat the council of wise men that she had set up and take over and start everything up again.
True.
I mean, that sort of, it's more showing just how ridiculously wrong.
Well, actually, it more shows how completely she unbalanced and that the system she put in place.
was not.
Yeah, when even a butcher can take over. I
Yeah,
think that's
exactly.
more of it.
And that's her naivete, that's her inexperience,
Yeah.
that's her good intentions. But the road to hell
Road to the seven hells.
yeah, is paved with good intentions. So,
Yeah.
I would say that Dario. Let's touch on him because I
That's probably our big problem, other than the fact that we feel that her acting isn't quite what it should be in
yeah.
some sequences. It's the relationship with Dario, because Danny and Dario, that's nothing like Danny and Dario in the books.
Well, and
I mean,
it's part of it. I think they were saying, well, she's older. You can't sell the same sort of mooning and infatuation. I don't know. I like Husman.
She's not that much older.
Well, the actress is 20 something. The
Yes,
character is 18, or I guess maybe even 19 now.
Yeah, well, 19-year-olds can moon just as well as
Sure,
14-year-olds.
But I think they're just concerned about, the fact is that storyline is, there are people who are quite vocally disliking it, and I think they're wrong.
Yeah, I think they're wrong too, because I can very much identify, I think, with her and how she's acting in. I mean, she's just a young girl. And it's not just, she says that in the books all the time as a way of sort of getting people to underestimate her. But the fact is that it's also true that in some ways she is just a young girl, and to expect her to constantly go from strength to strength, that the people who complain about her material in A Dance with Dragons, they want her to just go from strength to strength, and they don't want her to get stuck in mundane things and get sidetracked by the fact that she's got hormones and there's this dashing fellow who's, wooing her basically, and she'd like some companionship, and she's very removed from everyone else. She doesn't really have friends that are close to her, and she'd like to be swept off her feet, and
totally understandable.
It's completely understandable. It's one of those things where people don't allow characters to have human failings and weaknesses.
That is really, there's another character in A Dance with Dragons who gets very similar complaints, and it's the exact same thing. Like, what did you guys think? Given where the character is left off, Tyrion.
Yeah.
You cannot imagine that he will be the same chipper, wisecracking, smartass that he was in the previous books. He's got a lot of issues to deal with, and we're privileged to be along for the ride.
But I mean, if we're saying that, if you think that they changed Danny and Dario largely in response to people being negative about that in the books, then yeah, I'm really fucking concerned about what they're doing with A Feast for Crows and A Dance with Dragons, because there are a lot of unfounded complaints about those books.
Well, I don't know. Well, here's the thing. I don't know that they themselves have gone around using responses from readers as their guide for how to adapt things.
Alternatively, they're bad readers themselves and have come to those conclusions themselves.
You're more negative than I am. I think what they see is challenging material, and that they see an audience that is, they feel that the television audience may be less able or willing to allow her to be in this very clearly ill-conceived relationship on her part. Ill-conceived and ill-conceived, of course. It's not ill-conceived. That's the thing is that in reality, it's not. If it had been King Rob taking some cute girl into his bed as just a bed warmer, and not necessarily as a wife or what have you, just a mistress on the side.
I mean, because frankly, she is much more mature than Rob, the way she deals with it.
Girls tend to be more mature.
Yes, but I mean, she doesn't entertain any ideas about being able to marry.
No, it's true. But what I'm saying,
Rob goes off and marries his fling.
Yeah, well, that's but no one would complain, though. I think if it had been a male character doing it. So there's a little bit of a sexism thing, but slut shaming. Oh, she's a slut. No, she's not. She's a hormonal young woman who's so isolated.
I don't know that people generally tend to feel that it's slutty. I get.
There are some people who have that
okay,
issue.
But what I see,
I hate them. So yeah.
Well, okay, but what I more see is the sort of people have a problem with her being girlish and having a romantic relationship, because when a guy has the hots for some girl and decides to sleep with her, well, that's just sex.
Yeah.
Danny is getting emotionally involved, and that makes her weak.
Yeah.
So I see it more of that complaint, really.
Ultimately, I think people are wrong about that, and I think so. My issue, I think more than anything, it's just an age thing. I think they don't feel that it can quite sell as well. And and so Huisman, I mean, the big issue is, I mean, again, I like him as as an actor, on a person.
He's not dark.
He was great to talk with for the interview. It was very laid back, very chill, very Dutch.
Exactly, what do you mean by that?
I will leave that to the audience to decide what that means. But he was very cool to talk to, and very pleasant. And his character comes off as a little edgy, a little roguish, like a Han Solo roguish, like.
No.
Yes, a Han Solo roguish, like he
doesn't get the Han Solo level.
Well,
he's a lot more cutesy.
In the style of a guy who is kind of, you get the sense that he's not really he
does not get the rogue stamp of approval. I'm sorry. He's like a trainee rogue.
Han Solo is not a guy, is not a cutthroat, right? And
but he did shoot first.
He did shoot first, but he did shoot first. This is absolutely true, but he's not a cutthroat. That Greedo was going to kill him or take him to Jabba, and Han was shot in self-defense. It was perfectly fine. George Lucas, it was okay for Han to shoot first. And I've heard that Disney is actually planning to re-release the original with Han shooting first. Thank God. This is not the Star Wars discussion channel. But what I'm saying is, despite he's a rogue, but he's a sort of Errol Flynn kind of dashing.
Oh, come on, he has nothing on Errol Flynn.
I'm talking about Han Solo here.
Okay, well, Dario has nothing.
What I'm saying, but what they have in common is they are not cutthroats. They don't come off as people who are murderers, who are very bad people.
Well, I'm just saying that Dario comes across as softer even than Han Solo and, Errol Flynn's
Fine, but I'm saying is fine.
So he's even that over there on the spectrum.
Yes, I was going to get to that.
Oh, sorry.
But what I'm talking about is the Dario of the novels is a bit of a monster. He is a monster in the sense that she says so to herself. He proposes a bloodbath as a solution to her problems, and she realizes, wow, that's even she can't conceive it. I mean,
in that sense, he's a check in the other way, because he says things that she realizes that goes too far.
Yeah, and this Dario doesn't seem to be at all like that. So he comes off as like...
No, he swims out and picks flowers.
He swims out to the islands and picks flowers for her, and it's all kind of charming and cutesy and like a summer romance flick, and it's... and maybe the darker, but I mean, the actor before from the third season, and the writing they gave him, I mean, when he drops those heads down on the ground, like, that's okay, that's a cutthroat, and like he just solved this problem by murdering people, and there you go. And Huisman's Dario feels removed from that. He doesn't feel like the guy who would have done that. Now, obviously, it is still the same character, but it's just how he seems, and he's going to be the one defining the role.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
I mean, because what I liked, Dario was never a character in the books that I really paid much attention to. He was, not my type of character. If you're looking at, male characters of tertiary importance in books, how interesting they get kind of depends on, to some extent, whether they are, interesting, so to speak. And, well, Dario was like, I couldn't quite see what Danny saw in him before A Dance with Dragons. And then I thought it was very interesting how it developed obviously I can't really go into much as that could spoil some material, but I like the fact that it looks like he develops from someone who seems like he's probably just there to take advantage of her.
Yeah.
And then it turns out, well, actually, it looks like he actually has feelings for her.
Yeah.
Because I by the end there, I was becoming quite convinced that he really has feelings for her. That some of the actions that he's taking are a bit irrational because he actually has feelings for her.
Yeah.
That go beyond just, you know, lust for her body and lust for a position.
Yeah.
So they're kind of missing out on that opportunity as well.
So far, I mean, they have the whole of a Dance Dragon material to
Well,
go with.
no,
so
because
we'll
it's clear here that Dario is supposed to be infatuated with her.
So long as we don't have him talking to someone away from her and who is an uninterested party or on his side, and we don't absolutely know. I believe you. I believe you. But
I think they're playing it as a genuine romance at this already.
And then they'll complicate it. Yeah. I think it's gonna go a little bit the way of the Shay and Tyrion, and we'll be discussing that one again. But other companions, Grey Worm and Missandei, I kind of liked what they did with them.
Yeah,
I like that.
Replacing essentially the relationship they had intended with Irri and Rakaro. I would much have preferred to have them around still, because we were really fond of especially
Elias Gabel.
Yes, Elias Gabel, who played Rakaro. That was a shame that they lost him.
Yeah, but
a shame that they then had to write out Irri in such a clumsy way that they had to.
Yeah. But I enjoyed it. Some people disliked it. Oh, it's taking time. But I think
there was some nice eye candy, but hey.
Yeah, well, it's. But the thing is that some people complain about it. It's like, oh, taking time. I'm not interested in them. Blah, blah, blah. I mean, I don't think you have to be interested in everybody. But the one thing that is true about Dany is, especially this season now, Jorah is gone. She has very few people who feel like she can communicate and interact with on a level where they have narrative weight. They're not just props for her.
Yeah.
I mean, Barristan so far is a prop for her, and I hope next season will fix that.
Yeah. They have plenty of good material. He is actually a point of view in A Dance with Dragons.
Yeah.
And he figures plenty in Dany's point of views as well. So they do have some really good material they could work with. They have material they've skipped since earlier that they could work with as well.
Working back, yep. But so I think it's a perfectly reasonable choice to sort of
build them up a bit.
To build them up a bit, because in the novels, I think it works to have it all sort of Dany focused and have her as a point of view, because it plays up her isolation.
Yeah.
And they're clearly not quite going that way with her. They kind of
it's difficult because it is all internal.
Yes.
You're basically Dany thinking about how she wants to keep herself remote. She doesn't really want to have. She doesn't feel she can interact. I mean, at this time, she still has Irri and Jiki, and she can't relate to them any longer. She's at the top of this pedestal, really, and she's feeling, it's lonely at the top, and she's really feeling that.
Yeah.
And it's probably very difficult to sell without the internal parts.
Yeah, exactly. So giving her some people who have a story that she can sort of look into and be a part of and fleshes them out so that her interaction with them feel more meaningful is, I think, a perfectly reasonable choice. I just hope
they don't retcon anything about the Unsullied.
Yeah. And the other companion, I guess, of note, of course, is Jorah, who is gone. Ian Glenn has definitely, it feels like season to season, he's featured less and less.
Yeah.
His scenes have been kind of short ever since
really
Dario.
Much to do. That's true.
And I kind of wish we had more interactions between him and others besides.
But obviously, part of the problem is that they basically had to invent some material here, in that he should have been gone much earlier.
Oh yeah.
So
much earlier. I mean, Marine is taken, but
yes, but because they're restructuring, and it sort of gets a little weird at the point where she sends him off.
Yeah,
is not at all the same. So I think they've ended up treading water a little bit with him.
Yeah. So it's and where's he going? I'm pretty sure we'll be seeing him again next season. Never you fear.
Yeah.
Again, no insight. I'm almost certain I know how that's gonna work. So,
just find it hard how they're gonna sell the Dance with Dragons material with him being so very different from Jorah in the novels.
I don't know. I think that'll be fine. Marine in general, I mean, gorgeous production-wise, visual effects and everything. His door, too little seen so far.
Based on that scene, I don't really want to see more of him, but
we'll see how they play it. You know, it's too early to tell, but I like the bit of, I like the bit that they used the slaves who were plotting, arguing where the rebellion of Grey Worm comes in. That was cool. The shepherds, including the one who brought in his burned daughters, Zala, Hazea. I don't know, guys, why you feel you have to change names. Hazea is a nice, lovely name.
I mean, it's, just as general advice, if ever David and Dan were to hear what we say, don't make up names, guys. I mean, Zala, fine, that one will give you a pass, but you've made up some really weird shit. Like, there's a wildling named Colback. And there were some, I mean, I don't know if there was any names that were as bad as some of the ones that popped up last year, but don't make up names.
Yeah, not really a talent.
No, just grab some minor character from the books and reuse it, or change a letter or something.
Yeah, or just don't change the name in the first place when
when you actually have a name, stick to it.
But and Finesse, I thought the actor who did that role was really very dignified, and also they did some really nice casting of this small parts just to flesh out Marine a little bit. I'd like to see. I'm hoping we'll see her out and about in Marine and seeing her.
There's a lot of political stuff there that they have to introduce characters for. I hope.
I hope they need to,
because otherwise that storyline from A Dance with Dragons just isn't gonna work. If all it has to hinge on is his dar, that's gonna be difficult.
No, they need a little bit more. They need a bit more.
I forget if there's any casting that is relevant.
I can't recall of anything. So next we'll move on and we'll discuss Dragonstone.